Have you ever wondered what secrets lie hidden in the ancient pages of the Book of Numbers? It may seem like a dull collection of names and censuses, but beneath that surface, there's a chilling revelation that could change everything you thought you knew about biblical history. Some scholars speculate that intertwined in those genealogies is a cursed bloodline, one that could ultimately give rise to the Antichrist. Imagine uncovering a lineage so powerful, so wicked, that it threatens mankind's very future. So who are the players in this cosmic drama? As we delve into this mystery, remember, Jesus is with you every step of the way. No matter the darkness that surrounds us, His light shines brighter. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're from and how Jesus has transformed your life. May Jesus bless you abundantly. The Book of Numbers at first glance reads like a meticulous account of genealogies and tribal counts, a seemingly straightforward census undertaken in the wilderness of Sinai. But deeper examination reveals how these numbers and names might form a spiritual map of profound significance, capturing the dual themes of divine blessing and human rebellion that weave throughout the narrative. As Moses records the extensive lineage and organizational structure of the tribes, a tapestry of symbolic meanings begins to unfold, hinting at the inherited blessings and the ominous potential for future corruption within specific lineages, hints of shadows amidst the divine plan. Central to this sweeping narrative are the chapters of Numbers 1 through 3, where the arrangement of the tribes around the tabernacle carries both spiritual and perhaps prophetic implications. In the desert wilderness, this arrangement reflects an earthly mirror of heavenly order, each tribe positioned with a symbolism that could foreshadow spiritual destinies and conflicts. The tribes are meticulously arranged: to the east, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun; to the south, Reuben, Simeon, and Gad; to the west, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin; and to the north, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. At the center lies the Levites, guarding and transporting the sacred tabernacle, representing the spiritual heart of the community, the dwelling place of the divine. This encampment around the tabernacle suggests not merely a tactical or logical organization, but a deeper metaphysical symbolism. Each position around the sacred space might hint at the tribe's future role in Israel's unfolding story, and possibly a foreshadowing of both blessings and failures to come. For instance, the prominence of Judah on the east side, known historically as the line from which great kings, including David, and ultimately Christ, would arise, emphasizes its position as a tribe of breakthrough and leadership. Meanwhile, the tribe of Dan, known later for significant idolatry, is stationed on the north, a direction often associated with judgment and struggle, hinting perhaps at future rebellion or apostasy. Could these arrangements encode a spiritual warning through their orderly placement? Numbers, with its spirals of counting and recounting, might actually be offering esoteric glimpses into the origin stories of much more than a people. It might touch on themes of future spiritual insurrection and opposition to divine intent. In assigning each tribe a name and position, an insight is gained into their inherent spiritual identity and destiny, a destiny not fulfilled or thwarted entirely by their own actions, but also by the latent spiritual currents at play. One question looms large. Within these arranged names and numbers, is there an unspoken link to the origins of the Antichrist? The possibility seems laden with intrigue. Could it be that embedded within these genealogical records lies the seed of future defiance and the ultimate rise of a figure of supreme opposition to God's plan, a figure named in Revelation as the Antichrist? A being that would emerge as the pinnacle of rebellion, embodying the cumulative insurrections and failures of God's people throughout history, a history inscribed in the fabric of the wilderness census. The naming of these tribes thus resonates, beyond its practical purpose, holding within it profound spiritual weight. Each name holds significance, not just according to ancient cultural customs, but deeply embedded within the biblical narrative. Names reflect character, birthright, and in some cases divine intentions thwarted or fulfilled. Names like Reuben, derived from sorrowful circumstances that later reflects anguish in moral failure, offer insight into possible lines of opposition against God's appointed authorities, hinting at future dynamics explored further in the rebellion stories that follow. As we explore these genealogies, we begin to see not just the assembly of an ancient community, but hints of a spiritual trajectory that spirals toward both great revivals and grave apostasies. Within the names and numbers inscribed in these early chapters of Numbers lies a tapestry woven with divine intention and significant, often tragic, human freedom. These early arrangements, as they are set around the sacred tabernacle, a symbol of divine presence, become more than just a record for posterity. They are a profound reminder. For each tribe, each name, each figure forms a line in a greater scriptural tapestry that foreshadows the constant battle between heavenly intention and earthly action. While holding the promise of faithfulness, they also harbor seeds of discontent, foreshadowing moments like the rebellion of Korah, and perhaps, all the way through to later revelations, of entities emerging as ultimate adversaries of God's chosen people. In exploring these orderly accounts, we are invited into a deeper understanding, a realization that what unfolds within the Book of Numbers is not just a historical record. It is a spiritual reflection of how names and numbers, tribes and placements reveal the shadow and light that dance through the story of God's people, whispering hints of what is to come, including the prophetic whispers pointing towards the antithesis of divine design, the Antichrist. The simplicity of these wilderness records holds a complex, gripping narrative, enriched with theological insights that continue to resonate in our own ongoing spiritual journey. The story of Korah's rebellion, as detailed in Numbers 16, unveils a dramatic confrontation that echoes through spiritual history and into a prophetic future, offering lessons that extend far beyond its ancient context. At first glance, this rebellion may seem merely an insurrection against Moses' leadership. But upon closer inspection, its roots penetrate deep into the soil of spiritual defiance, forming a lineage that persists into eschatological revelations such as those described in 2 Thessalonians 2:4 and Jude 1:11. The narrative begins with Korah, a Levite allied with Dathan and Abiram from the tribe of Reuben, challenging Moses' authority. Korah protests that Moses and Aaron have taken too much power upon themselves, claiming that the entire community is holy. His words, while cloaked in the guise of promoting equality, betray a deeper spiritual dissent against God's chosen order. Here we unearth the first hidden message. Korah's rebellion isn't simply political or social, it's an argument against the divine structure God established. Moses, as a prophet, is God's mouthpiece. Rejecting him is, in essence, an act of spiritual rebellion against God himself, a theme that will foreshadow later portrayals of ultimate defiance. The significance of Korah's uprising finds a profound echo in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, which describes the ultimate adversary, the Antichrist, who will oppose and exalt himself over everything considered divine. Much like Korah, the Antichrist's power play will involve a denial of divine authority, a desire to upend God's established order. It's a spiritual lineage of defiance that Korah inaugurates, reaching its perilous zenith in prophetic end times. This intertwining of history and prophecy is further elaborated in Jude 1:11, where Korah is mentioned alongside Cain and Balaam, solidifying their places in a trio of profound biblical opposition. Cain, the first murderer, Balaam, who perverted his prophetic gifts, and Korah, who challenged divine appointment. Each represents a particular manifestation of rebellious spirit: murder, corruption of divine gifts, and defiance of godly hierarchy. They are the archetypes of opposition that stretch across Scripture to reflect human nature's propensity to resist God's will. Korah's narrative delivers a symbolic message with broader implications beyond the immediate consequences of his rebellion, his failure, and fate. The earth swallowing Korah and his allies is a stark manifestation of divine judgment and a symbol of the ultimate futility of opposing God's decrees. It stands as a foreshadowing of an eventual and comprehensive divine justice against spiritual rebellion, foretelling the fate of the Antichrist who will ultimately be destroyed by the coming of Christ. From a theological perspective, we see Korah's line as a cautionary tale about the spiritual inclination to question and defy God's order. It serves as a pattern recurring throughout spiritual history, warning us of the dangers inherent in ignoring divine authority. To this extent, Korah's story is more than an individual act of rebellion. It is emblematic of a spiritual opposition resonating through to the apocalypse, culminating in the revealing of the lawless one as highlighted in Thessalonians. Through fair contemporary lens, Korah's rebellion is not antiquated, but a mirror reflecting the constant spiritual battle within our hearts, a call to examine where we might, even subconsciously, resist God's direction in our own lives. Just as Korah sought to undermine Moses, we may find ourselves questioning God's path for us in modern forms, like through pride, self-gain, or rejection of truths inconvenient to our desires. Much as previous chapters have explored genealogies, as signposts to understanding biblical narratives, Korah's tale merges with the spiritual map. It underscores the need to recognize and combat our propensity for rebellion, whether within a congregation, in the structures of our faith, or within the personal struggles of our innermost thoughts. Every generation faces its Korah moment, where obedience to God's structure is tested. The allure of self-authority versus submission to divine will remain a pivotal challenge, echoing the rebellion captured in this chapter and pointing forward to the ultimate testing of loyalty in prophetic fulfillment. Thus, the rebellion of Korah is more than historical. It is archetypical. It instructs us to discern the spiritual defiance within, reminding us of the lineage of opposition, from past rebellion to future prophecies. In recognizing this, we are cautioned to endure, to seek spiritual unity rather than division, and to hold to God's ordained order as we navigate our own paths through the complexities of faith and obedience. In the biblical narrative, the figure of Balaam emerges with intriguing complexity, his story found primarily in Numbers 22 to 24. Balaam, a diviner of renown, becomes an unlikely focal point of divine intervention. Initially, this sorcerer is summoned by Balak, the Moabite king, to curse the advancing Israelites, promising him wealth and honor. However, as the story unfolds, it becomes apparent that Balaam's path is fraught with unexpected twists and turns, mirroring a deeper spiritual struggle woven into the fabric of biblical prophecy. Balaam's initial encounter with the divine sets the stage for his infamous journey. As he attempts to comply with Balak's request, an angelic figure intervenes, reinforcing the divine will over occult intentions. With each attempt to curse Israel, blessings issue forth instead, confounding Balak's expectations. This juxtaposition between human desire and divine directive highlights a recurring theme: the futility of opposing the Almighty's plans. Yet beneath the surface of Balaam's apparent submission to God's will lies a pernicious intent, driven by greed and ambition, an intent that bears ramifications far beyond his own era. The narrative in Numbers 31:16 sheds light on Balaam's counseling to the Moabite women, planting the seeds of spiritual seduction that ensnare Israel through illicit enticements. This insidious act of leading Israel astray with Moabite and Midianite women introduces a subtle yet potent form of warfare, a corruption from within. The spiritual defilement through idolatry sets off a chain of consequences, culminating in a devastating plague among the Hebrews. Balaam's manipulations, therefore, become emblematic not merely of individual sin, but of a pattern that echoes through the ages. Further exploring Balaam's legacy, one might speculate on a symbolic prophetic seed of destruction carried forward by his actions, an ominous lineage metaphorically connecting to future embodiments of rebellion against divine order. Balaam's shadow lingers over the ages, manifesting in various guises of false prophecy and spiritual defilement. The lurking danger of idolatry and corruption stretches into the eschatological imagery of Revelation 13, where a second beast arises, reminiscent of Balaam's deceptive counsel, to funnel the hearts of many toward ruin. The second beast, emerging as a deceiver, embodies the end times deception hinted at in Balaam's legacy. With false miracles and seductive words, it serves as a poignant callback to Balaam's saga. It misleads the faithful by disguising danger with the guise of the divine, a betrayal of trust that resonates with Balaam's treachery. Just as Balaam blessed instead of cursed, the second beast conceals its true nature beneath an outward facade of religiosity and influence, misleading the nations with delusions of grandeur. The role of Balaam as a precursor to the Antichrist archetype crystallizes when viewed through the lens of prophetic fulfillment, reaching all the way into the Book of Revelation. This reflects a consistent biblical portrayal where adversarial figures arise, challenging the divine will through manipulation and deception. The narrative threads tying Balaam to these end-times figures serve as a cautionary illustration of how unresolved spiritual compromises can escalate into widespread spiritual devastation. In the unfolding panorama of spiritual warfare, Balaam's story stands as a harbinger of ongoing caution. It alerts believers to the ever-present threat of spiritual corruption clothed in cunning appearances. These discernments stir within the collective consciousness of the faithful, urging a vigilance against succumbing to the allure of deceptive doctrines that promise prosperity and power at the expense of righteousness and truth. Thus, Balaam's narrative transcends its ancient setting, reverberating through the corridors of time with a message of discernment, caution, and spiritual fidelity. In examining Balaam's curse and the prophetic seed of destruction it sows into the biblical tapestry, one is called to reckon with a vital question. How do we, today, guard against the seductive allure of ideologies and teachings that defy the divine, yet cloak themselves in misleading splendor? This chapter intertwines the immediate consequences of Balaam's actions with the broader prophetic implications for posterity, drawing a continuum between the deception in Moab and the figurative summoning of beasts in Revelation. Balaam's tale is more than historical or allegorical. It is a profound admonition etched into the eternal narrative of faith, urging us to remain steadfast in the truth as the cosmic drama of good versus evil unfolds across the epochs. In the hallowed depths of the biblical canon lies a narrative intertwined with the enigmatic symbolism of serpents, a recurring image of both judgment and deception, as seen in Numbers 21:6-9. This scripture recounts a time when the Israelites, wandering through the wilderness, spoke against God and Moses. In their discontent, serpents were sent among them, inflicting agony and death. Yet paradoxically, salvation came through a bronze serpent set upon a pole. Those who looked upon it lived. Here the serpent serves as an emblem of divine retribution as well as salvation, a duality that echoes through the ages. This symbol reverberates within the Gospel of John, where Jesus draws a profound parallel to himself, proclaiming that just as Moses lifted the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. John 3:14. In this comparison, he transforms the ancient symbol of the serpent into a prefiguration of his crucifixion, a paradox where the instrument of death becomes the source of eternal life. This inversion of meaning underscores the theme of redemption, woven intricately through the fabric of biblical prophecy. However, in the prophetic panorama unveiled in the Book of Revelation, the serpent imagery takes on an ominous form. Revelation 12.9 unveils the serpent as a manifestation of Satan, the great deceiver and accuser, cast down from heaven to wage war against humanity. This apocalyptic revelation intimates a persistent, malevolent influence that reverberates through history, a serpent's lineage that seeks to corrupt and seduce, echoing the rebellion and pride described in the wilderness experience. Many theologians and scholars have speculated on the notion of this serpentine imagery representing not just a spiritual presence, but also a physical continuity, a corrupted bloodline descending from the shadows of antiquity into the present and future. This idea proposes that a lineage tainted by rebellion has persisted, subtly intertwining with humanity, preparing for the emergence of a final deceiver in the last days. The narrative fragments from the wilderness serpent episode encode a darker legacy, a tale not merely of individual sin but of corporate rebellion against divine authority. It is a tale marked by seduction and pride, reminiscent of Eden's fall. The serpent in the garden beguiled Eve with promises of knowledge and becoming like God, a seductive whisper that has echoed throughout history, urging humanity towards self-exaltation and away from divine dependence. Could it be then that this legacy, enshrouded in secrecy and mystery, propels forward toward an ultimate manifestation in the final chapter of time? Might the ancient strain of rebellion and deception culminate in a singular figure, a final deceiver, emerging from this ancient bloodline to mimic Christ's purity with an incomparable form of corruption? This interpretation provokes reflection on the nature of evil and its long tendrils throughout sacred history. As one delves into Numbers and its symbolic revelations, the wilderness serpent can be seen as more than a narrative episode. It becomes an allegorical representation of the continual human struggle against pride and deception, a conflict that, according to prophetic traditions, crescendos into a climactic confrontation in the Book of Revelation. This chapter implores us to consider the implications of a serpent re-emerging in modern times, not just as myth or metaphor, but as an active, sinister force within the world. It aligns with the broader biblical theme of spiritual warfare, calling believers to vigilance and clarity, recognizing the deceptive subtleties of the ancient serpent in our contemporary landscape. Only by casting our gaze upon the crucified and resurrected Christ, as the Israelites did to the bronze serpent, can we discern and withstand the powers of deception that have stalked humanity through the corridors of time. Such reflections urge us to remain mindful, to stand firm in the face of deception's allure, a test of fidelity to the divine truth against the seductive call of pride and rebellion. It is a reminder that the battle against the serpent's legacy is not confined to ancient texts, but is indeed a present reality, one that demands discernment and courage in the unfolding chapters of our spiritual journey.